I want to know why you think that that's real and what you think is going on in those stories.
Well, first you've got the dialogue itself, which is cool wisdom for all people.
Yeah, and some of it is like hyper bizarre, like what Oppenheimer quoted at the detonation of the atomic bomb.
Right.
I am become death,
Kalo
destroyer
Shmi
of worlds.
Lokshaya Krit Pravito.
Is that
That's a Sanskrit.
How does he say it?
Kalo Shmi Lokshaya Krit Pravito.
Is that why?
Time I am the destroyer. Time I am the great destroyer, and I've come to destroy all worlds. So
that's the actual translation.
That's the actual translation in English.
Because his translation, Oppenheimer's, was "I am become death." Is that because of an issue with the translation between Hindu and English?
It's just different people translate it slightly different, but it's similar. Meaning, in that particular section that you pulled out, that was Krishna explaining like, God is beautiful, God is charming, God is your best friend. He's also death personified. So he's saying in that particular place, I'm actually also the destroyer of all the worlds. When we think of the yogis explain that God is everything, both the beauty and the destruction as well. And so Krishna just is sharing his attributes, and in that particular chapter, chapter 11, he's the most intimidating.
Where do you think all these stories come from? What do you think the origin of the Bhagavad Gita, of the Mahabharata, of all the ancient texts? What do you think the origin was? What was the motivation to put this stuff down? What was the original concepts that led them to write this, and where did it all come from? There has to be an origin of these wisdoms, right?
Yeah.
What do you think that is?
You know, to even answer the question, I have to take myself out of Raghu and just answer like a yoga teacher.
Okay.
Because to answer of what do you think, it's one thing you're sort of trained not to do as far as what is your personal opinion. I can give you my personal opinion, but I have to separate it from what the stories themselves say.
Well, give me your personal opinion.
My personal opinion is I hear what the stories have to offer. I find some value in the stories, and I try to apply wisdom to my life. It helps the direction of my life. It helps me escape potholes.
I understand.
The stories themselves say these are all real. They're way beyond your perception. They were orally transmitted. At a certain time historically, they understood people are getting dumber. See, we have a tendency to think we're at the pinnacle of evolution, but the Vedic teachings is that as we go on in this age, we get more and more disconnected. There was a time where architecture was more evolved, where the sciences were more evolved.
Wait a minute, stop. The sciences were more evolved?
The sciences, like for example, the building of these vimanas, which when we read them now, we just think that's mythological. Even weaponry. Weaponry, they say, were done with sound. If you study, there's one book called the Donner.
But do you think this is real?
Do I think it's real? I think it could be. I don't think it's definitely. I definitely
don't know. So you think at one point in time, human beings had vimanas and they flew around the sky, and then they had weapons that used sound?
Could. Why not?
There's no evidence, archaeological evidence, that there was a flying craft or that there was ever any technology that allowed people to leave gravity.
Yeah. Sometimes there may not be evidence. Just like there's, let me show you, what was the guy's name? Hill? Or Barney Hill. What's your evidence? You could just say, well, it's my own experience.
Well, I mean, he's just that's a totally different thing. He's just relaying his personal experience. He could have had some sort of a psychotic break. He could have had, there could have been mass psychosis with him and with two people. Well, group psychosis with him and his wife.
I can say that there are things that make no sense to me, yet I sort of tried them anyway. And then after time, they made sense. Like, well, wait a second, that does make sense. Or at different vantage points of my life, it didn't make sense when I was 20, but at 50, that makes a lot of sense. So there's certain things that are huge leaps of faith that I can't say, I definitely know that to be true. Just like chanting on mantras. It made no sense. It made no real sense. But over time I realized actually that helps in this particular way.
But it achieves a state of consciousness. We've known that forever, that meditation in general achieves certain states of consciousness, and you can actually, with fMRI, you can actually monitor the changes in the way the brain is.
See, this is what I like about you. You're one of those guys. You get into these very interesting, subtle sciences, and then you find hard evidence for these things. And just hearing that thing with James Wilk and breaking all these things down, I'm more of a simpler guy. I find people where I trust the way they live, and they've applied stuff and walked It's more like I can tell the time, but I don't know how to take apart a clock and put it back together.
No, I think exactly the same way. I'm fascinated by watches.
Yeah.
But then you see all the gears behind a watch, like a self-winding watch, and you're like, I don't know what the fuck is happening here. I'm sure I can find it out eventually.
I'm like that with a lot of things, and I'm always impressed when you dig into it with people like this. But truthfully, if you want to know the honest truth, I was like, oh man, I hope Joe doesn't dig into it with me, because I'm not that kind of hard science guy. There's people, like even all the stuff I did in yoga.
I'm concerned with you as a human being. That's why I asked you very specifically, what do you think?
Right.
Well, what I'm asking is why you believe the Bhagavad Gita is real.
Sure. So my point is, there's reasonable amounts of faith in these other things that I've applied that have made me take a next step. So whether I believe it's real, I just believe the truths I can extract from it are real. Whether the war actually happened, there's a leap of faith.
The benefits of those of following those scriptures you apply, and you feel those benefits. So that's enough.
That's enough to make me move forward towards this.